Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is handsome Howard Kamin here, absolutely substituting for Marty York, who is on vacation this week. But we do have the reliable and outstanding Uncle Ben Walderman.
Good to be here, Howard.
How you doing this week,
I'm good,
Ben?
Howard. Good to be here. Much better this week after some good results and favorable winners last week. And yourself?
I'm doing great, Football's now into, I would call the second half of the season, sort of like where the pretenders stay pretenders and the contenders start to make their mark and make their move into the playoff race. But let's talk about the first half of the season, Ben. And I know you keep a lot of stats, you keep a lot of numbers, you look at a lot of different trends. What has impressed you and not impressed you so far in the first half of the season with what's gone on in the NFL?
Well, Howard, it seems to be like there's a bit of a changing of the guard in the NFL taking place now. Over not just this year, maybe it started last year, and it's really starting to take form this year. Perennial teams that have been in the playoffs in the past, like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New York Giants, Atlanta, Washington was in the playoffs last year, Houston was in the playoffs here. These teams are probably the big underachievers of the season thus far. Most of those teams don't look like they're going to make the playoffs this year. Certainly not the Pittsburgh Steelers, not the Houston Texans, and not the Washington Redskins, and not the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, the New York Giants seem to be on a bit of a run right now, but these teams here haven't really done what was expected of them. Some of these coaches are on the hot seat. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So these are the underachieving squads that I think are out there right now. And then, of course, on the flip side, you got some overachievers that have teams that maybe haven't been so good in the past. Like, of course, obviously the 8-0 Kansas City Chiefs. Howard, everybody's talking about them. You know, there's obviously the number one overachiever, if you want to call them that. They haven't really played anybody big yet, but we'll see. We're going to talk about that later this week and in the show. And the Indianapolis Colts have really, affirmed their stamp. Last year they sort of broke out. They made the playoffs. Was it a short-term solution for them? It seems like they're just rolling along with Andrew Luck. So they're one of the big teams. And I think the Carolina Panthers are starting to turn the corner too, having won 3 games in a row. Maybe Cam Newton's starting to get his feet under him a little better. He's not turning the ball over as much. Ron Rivera's got his team playing great defense. I think the Carolina Panthers are one of the overachievers. And I can even put the 4-4 New York Jets in that category. Even though they lost by 40 points last week, Howard, this team was not expected to do anything, and they're 500 at midseason. They were expected to blow out, be horrendous, and you know what? They've done pretty well for a 4-4 ball club. So those are the teams that I've looked at overachieve, underachieve thus far this season. And unless you have some other views on that.
Well, I would tend to agree with you. I mean, Kansas City, even though they brought in a new quarterback and a new coach. I mean, last year would they win 2-3 games all year? 2 games all year. This year, they're the only undefeated team left in football. I mean, are they a team that you would consider to be a Super Bowl contender? I don't know. I don't think are totally sold on the Kansas City Chiefs as of yet. We'll see down the stretch how they do, but I would look at some other teams that I think that can surpass them as the season goes on. Now, I know you also keep track of a lot of offensive and defensive numbers. Teams that score a lot of points, teams that don't score a lot of points, teams that allow a lot of points. And for the betting public out there, I think it's very, very important for them to know that, there are certain teams that just have a trouble scoring points. It just doesn't come natural to them to score points at will. And I know you have some teams in that category. Maybe you want to expand a little bit about that.
Well, sure, because now that we've had 8 weeks to look it over, get a little history on these teams, see what people have and what they have not. Teams that just can't score, it's a tough betting situation, Howard. I mean, continuously, week after week, teams cannot score. And, teams like Tampa Bay, even the New York Giants, the Pittsburgh Steelers, Houston, Cleveland, of course, Jacksonville, who's scored only 86 points.
Aren't they terrible? I've never seen a team that bad.
Oakland, these teams are all averaging 20 points or less in games, Howard. And, for the listeners and the viewers out there, these are tough betting situations to bet on because if you're scoring 15 points in the NFL, it's very difficult to not just win ball games, but cover point spreads as well. Okay, and these teams, I find that I will be fading these teams. I will not be backing these teams, the teams I just mentioned, because, like I said, you just can't depend on these teams to put any points on the board, and it's difficult to cover point spreads when you can't put points on the board. On the other side, Howard, also, when you look at the defensive side of the ball, Teams that are giving up near or close to 30 points or over 30 points a game is the same thing as you scoring under 20. Very difficult to cover spreads when you're giving up continuously 30 points every week. The New York Giants, even the Chicago Bears have given up close to 30. They've only played 7 games. They've given up almost 210 points. That's close to 30 points a game. Jacksonville, of course, even the Denver Broncos at 7-1 have given up over 25 points a game. These teams, and they haven't covered their spreads lately, okay? They did cover last week against Washington with the 31-point or 38-point outburst in the fourth quarter, or whatever it was. Washington's on this list as well, Howard, is a horrible defensive team, and the Minnesota Vikings as well. These teams you cannot bet on. You cannot bet or wager on teams that are scoring under 20 or giving up over 30.
It's a good point, and I think a lot of times when the betting public looks at certain teams, they look for teams that can't score. Like, the Green Bay Packers. I watched them play on Sunday. This team can score points. Aaron Rodgers just has that magical touch. So these are the teams you want to put your money on. Teams that even if they fall behind or if they have to get a quick score, they can make it happen. And these are definitely teams I would look forward to down the stretch to look for teams that can score the points. Also, being at the halfway point of the season, we have to look at the coaches out there. Certain coaches have really underperformed with their teams that were expected to do well, and for whatever reason, the team has not achieved even close to what they've done. Have you got a list, Ben, of guys are on the hot seat right now?
Well, yes, it's quite obvious what's going on out there, and certain coaches have lost their teams. We just talked about these perennial playoff teams like the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New York Giants, the Atlanta Falcons, the Redskins, Houston. But 2 or 3 of those teams, Washington, Mike Shanahan has to be on the hot seat, especially with Daniel Snyder as the owner. He will not tolerate this forever. I don't understand what happened to this team. Their offense is geared up now. They're scoring points. They're like 7th ranked in the NFL in total offense, and their defense just isn't getting it done. Gary Kubiak's had a good team in Houston for many years now and could never get over the hump. He's 2-5 this year on a Houston team that many people, myself included, thought they were going to be a Super Bowl contender. I was way off on that as well. This guy's on the hot seat. And then the other one who could have possibly made the playoffs is Mike Smith in Atlanta. The Atlanta Falcons were one of the finest teams in the league last year, 13-3. Now they're 2-5. This guy's feeling the pressure now to get something done. Okay, they don't have all day there with the nucleus of players they have to get this job done in Atlanta. And their owner, who happens to own Home Depot, will not tolerate this kind of thing down there. I just think those 3 guys are on the hot seat, as well as obviously Greg Schiano in Tampa, 0-7, and Leslie Frazier in Minnesota. They've just lost this team. The Minnesota Vikings, they don't even know who their quarterback's going to be from week to week. Adrian Peterson's not getting the job done. He's not the savior there, especially when they're putting 8 and 9 men in the box, and forcing the quarterback's hand there. So he's on the hot seat too. So there's 4 or 5 guys on the hot seat. I don't think anything's imminent, but these guys are certainly feeling the sizzle of the frying pan right now, Howard. And those are the coaches that I see this year, right now, under the gun.
You talk about the Minnesota Vikings, Ben, and this team is a team that's in total a lot of trouble. They can't figure out who to play at quarterback, and they have quarterbacks there, but they got Josh Freeman. Ponder's there, Matt Castle. Who do you think they should be starting at quarterback going forward?
Well, I'm not sure who they're even going to start this week because I don't know if any. Well, I know they're not starting Matt Castle. It's either going to be Ponder or Freeman. Personally, I don't know what they picked up Josh Freeman for if they're not going to start this fellow. They're 1-6. Where are they going, the Minnesota Vikings? Nowhere is the answer to that. They may as well go with Freeman, see what he's got. Granted, he hasn't had the whole offensive playbook under his belt yet, but look at this team hasn't won they beat the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was their only win when Pittsburgh was in complete disarray earlier in the season, and Adrian Peterson had 1 big game. I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. I don't see this team winning very many ball games in the second half of the year. Like you said, Leslie Frazier's lost this team. And, I think Ponder, to answer your question, is going to be under center this week. But, in 1 second, they could flip it over to Freeman at any moment, even right before the game, during the game. Anything can happen with the Minnesota Vikings. I don't like this ball club. Leslie Frazier's gone.
Okay, you're listening to Uncle Ben here on Football Picks. Sorry about that, guys. Uncle Ben on Football Picks. And don't go away because we got a lot more to come. We got his picks of the week, from talking to him before the show, he's got some real doozies this week. Some games you really, really want to pounce on. We also have his college picks, who he's always very sharp on. In our next segment, though, we're going to talk a little bit about a few of the games last week and how they unraveled, and we'll discuss a little bit about that. So don't go away. We'll be right back.